We now move to our series Behind the Ballot, where you get to meet candidates in this year's election. We're going to talk to Tim Scott. He's facing off against Paul Thurmond in South Carolina. Paul Thurmond is the son of the late Senator Strom Thurmond, and they are facing off on the 22nd of June. If Mr. Scott wins that election and the general election in November, he will be the first African-American Republican in Congress in almost 10 years and the first in South Carolina since Reconstruction. Welcome, Mr. Scott. I want to ask you, how are things going? You've got just a short sprint here at the end. How's it looking?
I think it looks really good. We've got a lot of work. We need to do a lot of voter contact. It's so important. We have our troops on the grounds. We're on the telephones. We've got air mail. Our direct mail is happening. TV. We're doing all that we can to make sure that our message is heard. Our voters are receptive to the message, and we're excited. I mean, it's a new day in South Carolina. It's a great day, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity to have a major impact on cutting the madness and spending in Washington.
What do you say about that madness and spending in Washington? Everybody's angry at Washington. The approval ratings are worse now than they were before the wave election in 1994. What do you say to a voter who says, you know, every time we send somebody up there to stop the madness and it doesn't quite happen, why are you going to be different?
Well, I think you look at two things. I have a voting record in the State House of Representatives in South Carolina where I am the lead sponsor on a bill that nullifies Obamacare. To me, Article 1, Section 8 of our United States Constitution gives us the enumerated powers of Congress. What you don't see there is health care. Therefore, it's a 10th Amendment issue, and it should be left to the states to decide providing health care for the states, for the individuals within the states. What we see in South Carolina in our last Republican primary, almost 9 out of 10 Republican primary voters said no to Obamacare. My bill, Bill 4181, is the first bill in South Carolina written to nullify Obamacare. This is a great example of limiting the size of government. If we are going to win our country back, if we're going to make sure that we don't look like Greece on a financial crisis standpoint, we have to stop spending money. We cannot ascribe to ourselves new entitlements that some unborn American will have to pay for. So the way you stop the madness is by having a consistent record of fighting for the issues that will salvage America's financial future and put the dollars back in small business owners, people like myself, and families who are desperately looking, scrapping and scraping things together to make their budget work.
And so
last month alone,
Democrats, if I can just interrupt on that, I want to get about Obamacare in there. They say, okay, you know, bring it on. Republicans want to repeal this health care, and they point to those same people who are scrimping and saving and trying to get by, and the benefits that will now come to them as a result of this legislation passing. They say it's dangerous for Republicans to want to take those benefits away from people, from seniors in closing the donut hole on Medicare, from parents who can now keep their kids on their insurance. What do you say to that argument?
I said that the private sector is perfectly positioned to do exactly the things that are necessary to reduce the cost of health care across America. If we would allow for competition between the states, we would see a reduction in the price of health insurance. If we would have tort reform and insurance reform, we would see a reduction in the price of health insurance. If we would break the link between having a job and having health insurance, we would lower the cost of health insurance. The private sector has already made the steps towards increasing the age that a person can stay on their parents' health insurance to 26 years old. Private companies have already started that move. We can make it happen in the private sector. What we don't need is a $1.2 trillion monstrosity on the backs of taxpayers. What we cannot afford are $52 billion of new taxes on small business owners like myself. What we cannot afford is almost $570 billion of new taxes spread across the American citizens. We can't afford to nationalize our health care. Finally, I'd say this. If you're looking for the quality of health care that is known as the best in the world, the only place to find that is in America.
Let me ask you a question.
To destroy that system is to destroy the relationship between a patient and a physician. It's not worth it.
Let me move off healthcare here for a moment. Your district is on the water, and we obviously have this spill in the Gulf that's been ongoing, will likely go on until August. There's talk about that spill going all the way up the Atlantic. Is this something your constituents are worried about?
You know, my constituents are certainly worried about the impact that the oil spill could have on the coast of South Carolina, with almost 21 million tourists coming into the 1st Congressional District. In the State House tomorrow, we'll have an opportunity we're putting together a piece of legislation that will ask our folks to go ahead and start creating a disaster relief plan or a crisis management plan that gives us the opportunity to work on that situation before it ever gets close to our coast, so that we'll be ahead of it. I have to salute Bobby Jindal, who said, I will take all comers to making this state better prepared so that there will not be a lack of responsiveness on the state level as there has been on the national level.
In terms of your philosophy of a limited federal government and the power of the free market, what's your view on BP? Some people who would listen to the argument you just made for getting the government out of health care and letting the free market distribute coverage and lower cost look at BP and they say, well, but this is what happens when a private corporation, cuts corners and there's this huge mess that then has to be cleaned up. How do you see the philosophy of a limited federal government in the context of BP and this oil spill?
I don't see it as being inconsistent. The truth is that the private sector does almost everything better than the government does it. The question of responsibility could have been addressed several years ago. We brought in experts from the Norwegian experts and the Brazilian experts came in and made some recommendations that would have helped us to avoid much of this disaster. 3 days after the disaster, we had folks from other countries offering us equipment. The question is the responsiveness question. The private sector does almost everything better. We had an opportunity within the first 3 days to have a different response from our federal government, and it didn't happen.
Let me ask you a question about the history of South Carolina. You're facing off against Strom Thurmond's son. Strom Thurmond, obviously the Dixiecrat candidate. He also had for a while the filibuster record in filibustering against the Civil Rights Act. Tell me about, and you're going to be perhaps the first African American from South Carolina since Reconstruction. Just tell me about the history of the state that would allow those two things to happen in relatively recent history.
Yeah, I think in the last 15 years as an elected Republican, our state and the voters of our Republican primaries have elected me. They've afforded me the opportunity to lead in this state, specifically in this first congressional district. So I'm excited about the voters of our state. We have open-minded folks here. We get a bad rap sometimes on issues of race as it relates to politics. But the truth is that for more than a decade now, Republican primary voters in South Carolina have been electing me to an office of leadership. And so I'm very appreciative of that fact. I look at the fact that Strom Thurmond evolved as a legend. He evolved as a politician. His last campaign, I was the co-chairman of his last election for Senate. So I think South Carolina, we've come a long way. We have seen our folks evolve. I'm very excited about having the issues that are consistent with the views of the people in South Carolina. I believe that there is a resurgence of Southern values that say we have the answers to the issues that ail us as a country, and I want to be the voice of those issues.
Let me ask you one last question on the bad rap that occasionally comes with your state. That people look at the politics of South Carolina in the governor's race. It's gotten pretty nasty at times, and now in the Democratic senatorial race there is a candidate who no one knew about and who everyone is scratching their heads from coast to coast about. What is up with South Carolina?
Well, South Carolina is a beacon of hope throughout this country. What's up with South Carolina is that we have some of the most conservative voters in the entire country. What's up with South Carolina is this, that we believe that saving the country from financial ruin is something that we do well, and we want to continue to do it. We believe that working towards strong issues on cutting taxes and reforming and restructuring the tax codes as we know it is important to the future of the state. What we don't do is we can't focus our attention on the things that are in the yesterday. We must focus on the things that are tomorrow. And present day, we have an opportunity to have our voice heard throughout this country, and this election will get it done.
And the politics of South Carolina will continue to be interesting. Mr. Scott, thank you very much for being with us.
Absolutely. Thank you. Have a great day.
And thanks all of you for watching Washington Unplugged. Join us right here every day on CBSNews.com at 12:30. I'm John Dickerson. Have a great day.